I never thought a single sentence could destroy my life. But it did. It was supposed to be harmless. Just a little teasing, a playful jab. Something to get under Daniel's skin. That night, we were sitting at the dinner table. The soft clinking of silverware filling the silence between us. The tension had been building for months, no years. Our marriage had become routine, predictable, safe. And safe? Safe was boring. I was annoyed. Maybe even resentful. The man I had married 7 years ago was no longer the confident, passionate guy who once swept me off my feet. He was reliable, steady, the kind of man who always made sure the bills were paid on time, and that my car's oil change never went overdue. But there was no fire. No excitement. And lately I had started craving something more. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have swallowed my frustration, smiled, and let the night pass in its usual dull rhythm. But I didn't. Instead I smirked, swirled my wine glass and said it. My ex knew how to take control. You could learn a thing or two. I expected a reaction. Maybe an argument, maybe jealousy, maybe even a flicker of insecurity. But Daniel didn't even blink. He set down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and looked at me with the calmest expression I'd ever seen. And then he said the words that made my stomach drop. Good. Because you're homeless now. Let's see if he's strong enough to carry your broke ass. A slow creeping panic crawled up my spine. He can't be serious. But then I saw it. The envelope on the counter. White, crisp, and with my name scrawled in his neat, deliberate handwriting. I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Go ahead, Daniel continued, his voice even. Open it. With shaky hands I reached for the envelope and tore it open. Inside were the words I never thought I'd see. Divorce papers. Already signed. Already filed. I gasped. Daniel, wait. No. His voice was sharp now, cutting through my panic like a blade. You had your fun, Emily. You wanted to push me? Well, here you go. I'm done. He stood up, taking his plate to the sink with a practiced ease, as if he hadn't just blown my entire world apart. I shot up from my seat. You can't be serious. He turned to face me, his dark eyes void of emotion. You think this is a game? You've been treating me like an option for months, dropping little hints about how I'm not enough, comparing me to some loser you dated before me. Well, guess what? I finally get it. I'm not enough for you. And I never will be. I felt my face heat up. Daniel, come on, I was just joking. His laugh was cold. Joking? You think it's funny to humiliate your husband? To put me down just so you can feel like you're above me? I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down I knew. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about the way I had been pulling away. The way I checked my phone when he was talking to me. The way I started dressing up a little more when I left the house. The way I'd been craving something beyond him. He had noticed everything. And now he was done. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, sliding his arms through the sleeves with a finality that made my throat tighten. Pack your things, he said, walking toward the door. I want you out by morning. I stumbled forward, my heart racing. Daniel, please, let's just talk about this. He paused at the doorway, his back still turned to me. Then in a voice so quiet it sent chills down my spine, he said, talk to your ex. See if he still wants you. And with that he walked out. I stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. My hands trembled as I clutched the divorce papers, my mind racing through every possible way to fix this. But deep down, a terrifying realization settled in. I had lost him. And worse? I had no one else to blame but myself. The silence in the house was suffocating. Daniel was gone, and I was left standing in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers with my hands trembling. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me like a boulder. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I stumbled back, gripping the counter for support as my breathing grew uneven. He wasn't serious. He couldn't be. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. He'd come back, we'd talk it out, and things would go back to normal. But then my eyes flickered back to the envelope. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to make empty threats. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. I could fix this. I had to. The problem was I didn't know how. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I never thought I'd have to call in desperation. Justin. I hesitated. My ex. The same ex I had thrown in Daniel's face just an hour ago, trying to rile him up. It had been stupid, reckless. I didn't even mean it. Justin and I had been over for years, and yet, in that moment, I had tried to use him as some twisted way to make Daniel feel inadequate. And now Daniel was gone. Swallowing my pride, I tapped the call button. It rang twice before his voice came through. Emily? Wow, this is unexpected. I closed my eyes, hating myself for what I was about to do. Hey, Justin. I need a place to stay. There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. Didn't expect that. Trouble in paradise. I clenched my jaw. I hate that he sounds so smug. Look, are you gonna help me or not? Another pause. Then, come by my place. We'll talk. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Be there soon. Hanging up, I pushed away the overwhelming sense of shame clawing at my chest. Justin was my last option. My parents had passed years ago, and my friends? They were more acquaintances than anything, the kind of people you grab drinks with but never really leaned on in a crisis. Daniel had always been my rock. And now that rock was gone. Dragging myself upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing clothes into it. Every movement felt robotic, my mind still struggling to process what was happening. One stupid sentence and I had ruined my life. By the time I zipped up the bag, my hands were trembling again. I took one last look around our bedroom, my eyes lingering on the framed wedding photo on the nightstand. Daniel looked so happy in that picture. We both did. I swallowed the lump in my throat and turned away. The drive to Justin's apartment felt surreal. The city lights blurred past me as I gripped the wheel, trying not to think about the fact that this wasn't just a bad fight. This wasn't a night spent at a hotel to cool off. Daniel was done with me, and I had nowhere else to go. When I pulled up outside Justin's apartment complex, I hesitated. I didn't want to be here. Being here meant admitting that Daniel was serious, that I was homeless, that I had lost everything. But I had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. Justin opened the door before I even knocked, leaning against the frame with that same cocky smirk he always had. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering just a second too long. Well, well, he said, crossing his arms. Didn't think I'd ever see you like this. I ignored his tone and pushed past him into the apartment. The air smelled like cologne and beer, and the furniture was the same cheap bachelor pad nonsense I remembered from before. Justin shut the door behind me. So, wanna tell me what happened? I dropped my bag by the couch and turned to face him, arms crossed. Daniel kicked me out. His eyebrows shot up, but his smirk never wavered. No kidding? What did you do? I hesitated. I made a stupid joke. Justin let out a laugh. Must have been a hell of a joke to get yourself divorced. I flinched. Divorced. The word stung more than I expected. Justin took a step closer, his voice dropping slightly. So what now, Em? You back for good? I frowned. This isn't about us, Justin. I just need a place to crash. He shrugged, but there was something in his eyes I didn't like. Fine by me. But let's be real, you wouldn't be here if you had any better options. I swallowed hard, knowing he was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't in control. And for the first time ever, I was terrified that Justin's apartment was exactly as I remembered, cramped, dimly lit, and carrying the faint scent of cologne and old beer. The walls were still bare except for a single framed poster of some action movie from years ago. Everything about it screamed temporary, like the kind of place someone stayed in until life forced them to grow up. I dropped my bag by the couch, still trying to process everything. It had barely been an hour since I left home, my home, but it already felt like another lifetime. I wanted to believe this was just a bad dream, that I'd wake up tomorrow morning and Daniel would be there, drinking coffee at the kitchen table, waiting for me to apologize. But he wouldn't be. Daniel was serious. He wasn't the type to bluff. And that meant my life as I knew it was over. Justin leaned against the counter, watching me with a smirk. He'd always had this way of making himself seem amused by everything, like the world was just one big joke meant for his entertainment. Let me guess, he drawled, pouring himself a drink. You finally pushed Daniel too far? I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't need commentary, Justin. I just need a place to sleep. He shrugged. Suit yourself. Just saying, I always knew you'd get bored with the guy. He was too safe. I tensed at that. He wasn't wrong, Daniel was safe. But wasn't that what I wanted? Wasn't that why I married him? Justin took a sip of his drink, studying me. So what was it? You cheat on him, or just say something stupid? My stomach twisted. I clenched my jaw and muttered, I made a joke. Justin raised an eyebrow. Must have been one hell of a joke if he threw you out. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew it wasn't just the joke. It was everything leading up to it. The way I had been pulling away. The way I talked down to him, dismissing his kindness like it was weakness. The way I rolled my eyes when he did something thoughtful, like bringing home my favorite coffee or fixing things around the house without me asking. I had been taking and taking, pushing and pushing, always expecting him to stay. And now for the first time ever he didn't. Justin exhaled and walked over to the couch, dropping onto it with a groan. Well, lucky for you, I'm feeling generous tonight. You can crash here for now. He patted the cushion beside him, that damn smirk never leaving his face. I hesitated. This was a mistake. Coming here was a mistake. Justin was the type to help, sure, but not without expecting something in return. I'll sleep in the spare room, I said firmly. Justin chuckled. Spare room? This isn't a hotel, sweetheart. It's a one-bedroom apartment. Couch or me, take your pick. My stomach churned, but I forced a tight nod. Couch. Suit yourself, he murmured, kicking his feet up on the coffee table and taking another sip of his drink. But don't be surprised if you change your mind. We both know you don't like being alone. I ignored him, grabbing my bag and digging out a pair of sweats and an oversized t-shirt. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let him see. This is temporary. Just for tonight. I'll figure something else out tomorrow. The bathroom was just as I remembered, small, outdated, with a flickering light that buzzed softly. As I changed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized myself. My hair was messy from the stress of the night, my eyes red from holding back tears I refused to shed. I looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who had lost everything in the span of a single evening. I leaned against the sink, gripping the edges so tightly my knuckles turned white. What have I done? For so long, I had convinced myself that Daniel would never leave, that no matter how much I pulled away, no matter how many little digs I threw at him, he would stay. Because that's what Daniel did. He stayed. He forgave. Until he didn't. I swallowed hard, forcing back the lump in my throat. I have to fix this. I had no idea how, but I had to. Because the alternative, starting over, losing Daniel forever, was too much to bear. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Justin was already sprawled across the couch, flipping through channels on the TV. He barely glanced up as I grabbed a spare pillow and blanket from the hall closet and settled into the recliner instead. Suit yourself, he muttered again, before turning his attention back to the screen. I curled up, pulling the blanket tightly around myself, but it did nothing to keep out the cold emptiness inside me. The room was silent except for the low hum of the television. And for the first time in a long time, I realized just how alone I truly was, that I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could hear was Daniel's voice. The cold finality in it. The way he barely even reacted when I made that stupid joke. He had already been done with me before I even realized it. The couch was lumpy, the blanket too thin, but it wasn't the discomfort that kept me awake. It was the gnawing anxiety, the crushing weight of my own arrogance. I thought I had control, I thought I could say anything, do anything, and Daniel would still be there. That he would always stay. And now I was on Justin's couch, staring at the ceiling while Daniel was somewhere else, probably sleeping soundly, already moving on with his life. I had never felt more alone. By the time the sun crept through the blinds, Justin was still snoring on the other end of the couch, one arm slung over his face, a bottle from the night before still clutched in his hand. I sat up, my muscles aching, my head pounding. My phone was on the coffee table where I left it. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing from Daniel. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what I had expected, an apology? A chance to fix things? But why would he call? He had been planning this. The papers had already been drawn up. I thought I had power in our marriage, that I could manipulate things with a word, a glance, a moment of withheld affection. But Daniel had been the one in control all along. The realization made me nauseous. I needed coffee. I grabbed my bag and rummaged for some cash before heading out of the apartment. Justin mumbled something in his sleep but didn't stir as I slipped out the door. The cool morning air hit my face like a slap. I sucked in a breath, my mind racing as I walked the 2 blocks to a nearby cafe. My reflection in the glass doors made me wince. I looked wrecked. Dark circles, messy hair. Yesterday's makeup smudged under my eyes. I stepped inside, ordered a coffee, and found a corner to sit in. And then, against my better judgment, I called Daniel. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. I gripped the cup in my hand so tightly I thought it might crack. My pride screamed at me to let it go. But my desperation won out and I tried again. This time he picked up. A sharp breath. A pause. Then, "What do you want, Emily?" His voice was cold. Unfamiliar. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Daniel, can we talk?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Now you want to talk?" I clenched my jaw. I was drunk. It was a stupid joke. "Yeah, it was," he said flatly. "But the joke's over now." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Please, Daniel. Let's just meet. One conversation." Silence. Then a sigh. "Fine. One conversation. But don't think this changes anything." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Thank you. Meet me at the house at noon," he said, then hung up. I exhaled shakily, staring at the screen. This was my chance. I had to fix this. Even if I had no idea how I sat frozen, staring at my phone long after Daniel had hung up. He agreed to meet. It wasn't much. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't a second chance, but it was something. And right now, something was all I had left. I had 3 hours to figure out what I was going to say. 3 hours to undo the biggest mistake of my life. I threw back the rest of my coffee, barely tasting it, and rushed back to Justin's apartment. He was awake when I got there, sitting on the couch with his feet up on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair sticking up at odd angles, and he had that same smirk he always wore when he thought he knew something I didn't. "You look like hell," he muttered, setting his phone down. I ignored him, grabbing my bag and heading toward the bathroom. "Where you running off to in such a hurry?" I hesitated. Telling Justin about Daniel felt wrong. Like somehow saying it out loud would jinx it. "Nowhere important," I said, stepping into the bathroom and shutting the door behind me. Justin chuckled. "Sure, Em. Whatever you say." I turned on the shower, letting the scalding water wash away the filth of last night. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't wash away the guilt. The shame. The voice in the back of my head that whispered, "You did this to yourself." By the time I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, Justin was standing in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe. "You know," he said casually, "if you're thinking about running back to Daniel, maybe you should ask yourself why you left in the first place." I stiffened. "I didn't leave. He kicked me out." Justin shrugged. "Same thing. He was never enough for you, Emily. We both know it." I clenched my jaw, pushing past him. "I don't have time for this. You think he's just gonna take you back because you say sorry?" Justin called after me. "That's not how this works." I stopped at my bag, gripping the strap so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't stupid. I knew an apology wouldn't erase everything. But I had to try. I changed into the nicest outfit I had in my bag. A simple blouse and jeans. Not glamorous but clean. Presentable. I dried my hair, applied a little makeup, just enough to make me look like someone who hadn't spent the night crying on a stranger's couch. When I walked out of the room, Justin was watching me with an amused expression. "All dressed up for the man who threw you out. That's cute." I grabbed my bag and threw it over my shoulder. "Thanks for the couch." "Anytime, babe." He leaned back, smirking. "You'll be back." I didn't respond, because I was starting to fear that he was right. The drive back to the house was suffocating. It wasn't my home anymore. It had been less than 24 hours since I left, but I already felt like an intruder as I pulled up in the driveway. Daniel's truck was parked out front. The sight of it sent my heart into a painful sprint. I sat in my car for a minute trying to calm myself, trying to think of how to start this conversation. But no words came. With a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and stepped out. Daniel was already standing in the doorway, arms crossed. He looked different. Colder. Like the man I knew had been stripped away overnight, leaving only this stranger in his place. "Come inside," he said. No emotion. No warmth. I swallowed hard and followed him in. The house smelled the same. His coffee, the faint scent of laundry detergent, but it felt different. Like I didn't belong here anymore. Daniel sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for me to do the same. I hesitated before lowering myself into the chair across from him. He didn't look at me. Just exhaled and ran a hand through his hair before speaking. "I don't know why you wanted to meet Emily," he said finally. "But if you're here to try and fix this, you're wasting your time." Panic gripped my chest. "Daniel." He held up a hand. "Let me finish." I shut my mouth. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, finally meeting my eyes. And what I saw there made my stomach drop. He wasn't angry. He was done. "I spent 7 years loving you," he said quietly. 7 years taking care of you. Making sure you had everything you needed. And the whole time, you treated me like I was something to settle for. I shook my head. "That's not true. Don't lie to me, Emily." His voice was sharp, cutting straight through me. "I wasn't enough for you. You wanted more. More excitement. More drama. That's why you pushed me. That's why you went looking for something else." My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was choking me. "You thought I'd always be here," he continued. "No matter how much you pushed. No matter how much you disrespected me. You thought you could say whatever you wanted and I'd just stay." Tears burned my eyes. "I was stupid, Daniel. I wasn't thinking. Please just." He shook his head. "No, Emily. You were thinking. You made your choice. And I made mine." His gaze was steady, unwavering. "I'm done." My breath hitched. "Daniel, please." He stood up, grabbing the divorce papers from the counter. "I didn't ask you to come here to talk about the past. You can take as long as you want to sign these, but understand this. You are not coming back here." A sharp pain tore through my chest. "You don't mean that." He held the papers out to me. "I do." I stared at them, my vision blurring. "I loved you," he said, voice softer now. "I would have given you everything. But I won't be disrespected, Emily. I won't be your backup plan." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "You don't have anywhere to go," I whispered. It wasn't a plea, wasn't a manipulation. It was the truth. He didn't even hesitate. "That's not my problem anymore." I sucked in a breath, trying to steady myself. Daniel didn't look at me as he placed the papers on the table and turned away. "Close the door when you leave." And just like that, it was over. I didn't move. Not at first. I just sat there, staring at the divorce papers on the kitchen table, my mind refusing to accept what had just happened. Daniel walked away. Not in anger, not in a fit of rage, but in cold, calculated certainty. He wasn't coming back. The finality of it crushed the air from my lungs. I wanted to scream, to grab his arm, to beg him to listen, to really listen. But what would I say? That I didn't mean it? That I was sorry? That I wanted him back now that I was losing everything? I could already hear his response. "Now you want to fight for this? Now that I'm gone?" I swallowed hard, blinking away the tears burning my eyes. I need time. I needed him to calm down, to see that we could fix this. That I could fix this. I reached for the papers with shaking fingers, skimming the words that severed our marriage like a dull blade. Irreconcilable differences. What a joke. This wasn't irreconcilable. This wasn't beyond fixing. This was me being stupid, pushing too far, and now Daniel was trying to teach me a lesson. That's what this was. A lesson. I just had to prove to him that I understood it. That I had learned. I had to be smart about this. Stay calm. Don't push. Give him space. Let him think. I sniffed, quickly wiping my eyes before standing. I wouldn't let him see me cry. Not now. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was deafening in the silence. Daniel was still in the living room, his back to me. He didn't turn around when I picked up my bag. My throat tightened. I'll be in touch," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. He didn't even acknowledge me. I waited for something, anything, but he stayed still, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond me. A lump formed in my throat as I turned and walked toward the door. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. I paused at the doorway, glancing over my shoulder one last time. He didn't move. The pain was unbearable. With a deep, shuddering breath, I opened the door and stepped outside. As soon as it shut behind me, I felt like I had been physically cut off from my own life. I stood there on the porch, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. The house I had lived in for 7 years was now just a building, a place I was no longer welcome. I swallowed the wave of nausea rising in my throat and forced myself to move. This isn't over, Emily. I made my way to my car, my legs feeling like lead. The afternoon sun was too bright, too cruel, making everything feel too real. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel, staring at the house in front of me. Daniel didn't come to the window. He didn't check to see if I left. He just let me go. A ragged breath tore through me as I started the engine. Where do I even go? Justin's place? The thought made me sick. I needed to be alone. To think. To come up with a plan. I pulled out of the driveway and drove aimlessly, the familiar streets blurring together as my mind spiraled. I had no job. No savings. No backup plan. I had spent years relying on Daniel, his stability, his support, without realizing just how much I had taken it for granted. And now, without him, I had nothing. The weight of that truth settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I gritted my teeth. No. I won't let this be the end. Daniel might think he's done with me. He might believe that I was some mistake he had finally fixed. But he didn't get to decide that. Not yet. This marriage isn't over until I say it is. I drove for hours. The city blurred past me. Block after block of familiar streets, places Daniel and I used to go together. Restaurants where we'd had date nights. Grocery stores where we'd argued over brands of cereal. The gas station where he always insisted on filling up my car because, Emily, you always let it get down to empty. It hit me then. There was nowhere in this city that didn't have him in it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking rapidly against the wave of emotion rising in my chest. I had told myself I wouldn't break down, that I wouldn't let this destroy me, but it already had. Daniel was my entire life, and I had spent years pretending he wasn't enough. Now I was the one who wasn't enough. I pulled into an empty parking lot, cutting the engine and resting my forehead against the steering wheel. The silence in the car was deafening, my thoughts screaming in the void. What now? I couldn't go back to Justin's. The thought made my stomach turn. He was my past, not my future. I could check into a motel for the night, but I had barely any cash on me. The idea of swiping Daniel's credit card made me feel pathetic. Then it hit me. I had no job, no income, no plan. Panic tightened around my ribs like a vice. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I could call a friend, but the ugly truth was I didn't have any real friends. Oh, I had people to go out with, people to gossip with over brunch, people to send funny texts to when I was bored. But not a single one of them was someone I could call in a moment like this. I had made Daniel my whole life, and when I got bored I destroyed it. Now I had nothing. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the dashboard, willing myself to think of a way out of this. Think, Emily. I needed a job. Some kind of income to keep myself afloat until I figured out how to fix things with Daniel. I pulled out my phone and started searching. I had a college degree, but I hadn't used it in years. I had worked a few admin jobs before I met Daniel, but after we got married I never had to worry about money. He had been more than happy to support me, and I had been more than happy to let him. Until I got restless. Until I got stupid. Now I needed to prove to Daniel, to myself, that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I scrolled through job listings, my stomach twisting at the idea of working retail or waiting tables, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I sent out a few applications, my fingers moving automatically, but it all felt pointless. Even if I got a job tomorrow, it wouldn't change the fact that I had nowhere to go tonight. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. I pulled up my texts and scrolled to Daniel's name. Don't do it. Don't beg. But maybe if I just reached out. Maybe if I could get him to talk to me, to see that I was trying, he'd at least let me stay in the house while we figured things out. I hesitated, then started typing. Daniel, I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But can we just talk? I don't have anywhere to go. I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. The 3 little dots appeared immediately. My breath caught in my throat. Then they disappeared. A few seconds later, his response came through. Not my problem. Figure it out. I let out a strangled gasp, my fingers tightening around my phone. No hesitation. No second thought. Daniel was done. And for the first time I realized he really truly didn't care anymore. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Fine. If he wanted me to figure it out, I would. Even if it killed me. Daniel's words burned into my brain like a scar. Not my problem. Figure it out. I stared at my phone, hoping, praying that he'd send another message. That he'd realize how heartless it sounded. That he'd soften, tell me to come home. Offer even the smallest bit of kindness. But nothing came. Because Daniel wasn't playing a game. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He just didn't care anymore. A hollow ache settled deep in my chest. I had spent years pulling away, keeping him at arm's length, making him feel small. And now? He had finally stopped reaching for me. I squeezed my eyes shut, tilting my head back against the car seat, trying to steady my breathing. I have to fix this. But how? I had no money. No place to go. No one to call. The reality of my situation hit me like a punch to the gut. I was homeless. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling shakily. I have to think. I have to be smart. I could go back to Justin's, but that was the last thing I wanted. He was a mistake I had already made once. I wasn't about to make it again. A motel was an option, but it wouldn't last long. Even if I maxed out my credit card, I had maybe a week before reality caught up with me. I needed long-term stability. And I knew exactly where I could get it. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I had ignored for years. Monica. My older sister. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 2 years. Not since she called me out on the way I treated Daniel. You don't deserve that man, Emily. One day you're going to push him too far, and he's not going to come back. I had laughed it off at the time. I wasn't laughing now. Swallowing my pride, I hit call. It rang. And rang. And rang. Just when I thought she wouldn't answer, her voice came through the line. Emily. I exhaled, relief and humiliation tangling together in my chest. Hey, Monica. Silence. Then, what do you want? I winced. No small talk. No warmth. Just straight to the point. I deserved that. I swallowed hard. I need a place to stay. Just for a little while. Another pause. Then a quiet laugh. But there was no humor in it. Let me guess, Monica said. Daniel finally had enough? Shame burned through me, hot and suffocating. Monica, please. I heard her sigh, followed by the clink of a coffee cup setting down. So now you need me? After years of ignoring my calls? After cutting me off because I wouldn't pat you on the back for treating your husband like trash? I squeezed my eyes shut. I know I was a bad wife, okay? I know I screwed up. But I'm trying to fix it. And right now I have nowhere else to go. Silence stretched between us. Then finally she sighed. Fine. You can stay. But only for a few nights, Emily. I'm not going to hold your hand through this. Relief flooded through me so fast my legs nearly gave out. Thank you. Save it. She cut me off. Just get here. And don't expect me to tell you what you want to hear. The line went dead. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, shoving my phone into my lap. At least I had somewhere to go. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive another day. The drive to Monica's house was long, but I barely noticed the passing scenery. My thoughts were too loud, too overwhelming, drowning out everything else. I had avoided my sister for years. She had always been the one person in my life who refused to coddle me, who never hesitated to call me out on my behavior. Even when we were kids, she was the responsible one, the one who had to clean up my messes. And now here I was again, showing up at her doorstep asking for help. I wanted to believe that if I could just explain things, if I could just make her understand, she'd soften. But deep down, I knew Monica wouldn't be easy on me. I pulled into her driveway and shut off the engine. Her house was modest. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant, just stable. The kind of life Daniel had wanted with me. The kind of life I had thrown away. I took a deep breath and grabbed my bag, forcing myself to walk up to the front door before I lost my nerve. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Monica stood there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She looked me up and down, taking in my wrinkled clothes, my tired eyes. "You look like hell." I let out a weak laugh. "Thanks." She didn't smile. "Come in." I stepped inside, the scent of coffee and cinnamon filling the air. It was warm, familiar. Everything I suddenly realized I had been craving. Stability. She led me to the kitchen, where she already had a pot of coffee brewing. She poured me a cup without asking, setting it down in front of me before taking a seat across the table. "Talk." I swallowed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. I hesitated, then sighed. "Daniel kicked me out." She didn't look surprised. "And why do you think that is?" I shifted uncomfortably. "I said something stupid." Monica arched an eyebrow. "Emily, cut the bull. What did you do?" I let out a shaky breath. I told him he could learn a thing or two from my ex." Her expression didn't change. "And he finally had enough." It wasn't a question. I nodded, shame burning through me. "Yeah." She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "And now what? You think you can just say sorry and he'll take you back?" I flinched. "I don't know. I need time to figure things out." Monica scoffed. "You had time, Emily. You had 7 years. And you wasted every single one of them making Daniel feel like he wasn't good enough." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I didn't mean to." "Didn't you?" She cut me off. "You pushed him and pushed him, knowing he'd never leave. Until he did." I looked down at my coffee, my vision blurring. "I thought he'd always stay." Monica exhaled, rubbing her temples. "You know, I used to feel bad for Daniel. Watching you treat him like he was beneath you. Watching you act like his love was something you could take for granted. But I don't feel bad for him anymore." My heart clenched. "Why?" She met my eyes, her gaze unrelenting. "Because for the first time in 7 years, he finally chose himself." The words knocked the air from my lungs. I had spent so much time thinking of Daniel as mine. As someone who would always be there, no matter how much I pushed him away. But he wasn't mine anymore. And maybe he never really had been. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but Monica didn't soften. She just shook her head and stood. "Guest rooms down the hall. You can stay for a few days. But after that, you figure out your own mess." Then she walked away, leaving me alone with the truth I had been running from. The guest room was small but comfortable, far more than I deserved. The sheets smelled fresh, the lamp cast a warm glow. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a safe place to sleep. But I didn't. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying Monica's words over and over. For the first time in 7 years, he finally chose himself. I had spent so much time believing Daniel would never leave, that he would always be there, always forgiving, always waiting for me to realize how lucky I was. But I had pushed him too far. And now I was the one left waiting. I rolled onto my side, reaching for my phone, my heart pounding as I pulled up our last conversation. "Me, Daniel, please. Just talk to me. Daniel." There's nothing left to say. It had been hours since he sent that message. I had read it so many times that I could see the words burned into my mind when I closed my eyes. There's nothing left to say. My chest ached as I hovered over the keyboard, my pride and my desperation battling for control. Just one more chance. Just one more conversation. Before I could overthink it, I started typing. "Me, Daniel. I know I don't deserve another chance. But please just meet me one last time. If you still want me gone after that, I'll stop trying." I hit send before I could change my mind. The seconds dragged into minutes. My stomach twisted with every passing moment of silence. Then finally the dots appeared. My breath caught. "Daniel, fine. Tomorrow noon. Coffee shop on Main." I exhaled shakily, clutching the phone to my chest. One last chance. If I couldn't fix things tomorrow, I never would. The next morning, I barely touched the breakfast Monica made. She didn't ask about my plans and I didn't offer. I could tell she thought I was wasting my time. Maybe I was. But I had to try. By the time I arrived at the coffee shop, Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking effortlessly composed. He was nursing a black coffee, his expression unreadable as I approached. I hesitated for a second, my stomach in knots, then forced myself to sit across from him. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. What do you want, Emily? I swallowed hard. I want to fix this. His jaw tightened but his eyes remained calm. Fix what? Our marriage? Or the consequences of your actions? I flinched. Daniel, please. I know I screwed up. I know I treated you horribly. But I love you. He let out a humorless laugh. You love me. He shook his head. No, Emily. You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone stable, someone who put up with your crap, someone who let you feel like you were better than them. Tears pricked at my eyes. That's not true. Isn't it? He interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. Be honest, Emily. If I had done to you what you did to me, if I had disrespected you, belittled you, treated you like an afterthought, would you still be here? I opened my mouth but no words came. Because he was right. If the roles were reversed, I would have left him a long time ago. He sighed and leaned forward, his voice softer now. You don't love me, Emily. You love what I gave you. And now that it's gone, you're scrambling to get it back. But you're not fighting for me. His eyes locked onto mine and my stomach dropped. You're fighting for comfort. The words knocked the air out of my lungs. Because deep down I knew he was right. I had spent our entire marriage testing him, pushing him, waiting for him to prove he was strong enough to handle me. And when he finally did, when he finally put himself first, I didn't know what to do with it. Tears slipped down my cheeks, and I didn't bother wiping them away. So that's it. My voice cracked. You're really done? Daniel exhaled, looking at me with something that almost resembled pity. I was done a long time ago, Emily. He stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Take care of yourself. Then he walked away. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to truly irrevocably lose.